So my name is Keira Dominguez, and I started writing books, and I knew that I didn't want to use a pen name. I just wanted to launch myself with all the very difficulty of the, like rule breaking of the I before E except after C rule.
Yeah.
I was like, let's go, let's go. Let's get in there with Keira. Right now, I write contemporary romance. My heat level is, I like to say it's warm pancakes. It's not spicy, but it will make you feel very nice at the end of the day.
Which is what we all need and like in our books as well.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
What was your inspiration for the Midnight Princess? I know it's a part of a series.
Yeah, when I began this series, I don't plan my series like as a big event. I sort of stumbled into writing the very first book of the series, and I don't know if anybody else has a sister like this, but I have a super annoying sister who's like, when are you gonna get me more pages? And I'm like, but I write Regency. I write magical Regency. I don't write contemporary. She's like, but you did. And where are the more pages? And sort of like shoved me through that whole process. And I came sort of out the other side with a book and this family that has all of these siblings. And I was like, well, I guess I should write another one. And so with the Midnight Princess, I'm on book number three. Um, each of the siblings has a different relationship with sort of the big elephant in the room with all of these books is the queen, the mother. And she has a lot of presence and a lot of power. And she sort of chafes some siblings more than others. Some want to be like her, some want to run absolutely the other way. And it was really fun this time to write the oldest sister. I'm not an oldest sister. I come from this massive family and I'm like way down the list. I'm like towards the bottom, but kind of in the middle. And it was so neat to like just sort of inhabit this whole way of being that isn't like me.
Yeah.
And sort of see things from the perspective of, those oldest sisters have to like run things. And it was super fun to get to see how this person who has such a sense of duty doesn't want to always do it
Yeah.
suddenly.
I think we always have siblings and sisters who are very annoying in different ways, but
Yes,
not all
yes.
the time.
I understand sisterhood extremely well, and I can't help but write about it. I really can't.
Such an important thing. If you do have sisters, a sense of sisterhood, even if you have like friends who become
Annoyances.
closer sisters as well. It's not just
Yes.
to be by blood.
Those close female relationships, I feel like track over a woman's lifetime and become so pivotal to how she becomes what she does eventually become. And I think that that's the fun of writing in this genre is that there generally tend to be not just romance, but all of these other things that come with it. And a lot of it is a respect for female relationships.
Which is love. I love that part of it because you don't normally always see that in books, and it's really important that we do see it. What drew you to writing in the first place?
Oh, so I sort of classic story. I was that like bookish kid who like falls in love with in the US it was sort of like Little House on the Prairie books. And I think I discovered The Secret Garden when I was in sixth grade, and I was like, oh, this is like my personality now. Um, in my early 30s, early to mid 30s, I had a baby that we will call the demon baby of Bethany. He was so bad, and he's 15 now, and he is an angel, and I love that kid so much. But he screamed for 3 years. It
Oh
was
no.
really hard. And in that time, I dove hard into these like thrift store purchased Harlequin novels from like the mid-century. And I started picking up books by an author named Betty Neals, who is British, and another by a New Zealand author named Essie Summers. I got really into these books, and I started a blog with my sister just kind of as a way to escape from the screaming. I cannot overstate how much screaming there was. Anyway, so I started this blog, and suddenly, even with a nursing baby, I was producing work every week consistently, trying to be funny for people. People found us from all over the world, people in Australia even, and started reading and sort of forming this little community. And I was like, I wonder if I could do this long enough to sustain a book. And that's kind of how it began.
I think that we all have our a little thing as readers to write our own books and stories that we sort of dream up as well. So it's really cool that you
Everybody's
went to
got a
blog.
story. Yes. I'm a big poetry lover, and I say even if you don't have a book in you, you have a story in you
Mm.
and it wants to come out. Do a poem, like something.
Something, something
People
creative
have it
to
in
have it
them, I'm
out.
sure of it. Yes.
What was your approach to world and character building since it is more of the historical Regency?
Oh goodness. So my first three books were traditionally published, historical, Regency, magical. They were kind of odd little books. I had to do a fair amount of real world building there because, you have so many customs and bits of language that you have to learn. And it was interesting that when I started my contemporary series, I didn't want to abandon that sense of world building. I knew that I wanted to do a fake country. Partly it's because partly it's because the limits of research could only take me so far. I'm like,
Yeah.
I could go crazy like researching, Danish wedding customs, or follow me here. I could make up a country called Sondmark, which is not Denmark, and I could get a little bit more fun with it.
Mm.
I try to throw everything in the kitchen sink at world building. So I don't forget money. I don't forget politics. I don't forget swear words. I don't tend to swear in my books very much, but boy, it's really fun making up swear words. A lot of fun. I don't forget that other countries exist and that there would be interactions and things. And it's interesting to see how a lot of those things were planted in the first book. And by the third book, I can go back into my notes and start like pulling, pulling like, like a bunny out of a hat. You can just reach into your bag of tricks and find something new to mine always. And that's super fun.
I guess once you have the rich world building, you can go, oh, actually, I want to explore this country now. It was taught
Yes.
introduced. I can go into there and go dive into that country's politics and everything as well, if you decide
Yes.
to. What did you have a favorite moment in the book to write?
Ooh, it was really interesting. So the characters are this fun set of characters. It was actually inspired by a real um scandal in Belgium. There was the king of Belgium, the king of the Belgians, I should say. He had an affair when he was a much younger married man, and that produced a child, and that child grew up, and she actually went to court, and as a middle-aged woman, she was granted the right to use the title of princess, even though she was completely illegitimate. And this inspired me to be like, well, if it happened over there, it can happen in my world too, in a little bit of a tweaked way. And I just thought, what's the worst thing for this oldest sister who wants to be proper and wants to keep things together and wants to do her duty always? What is her worst nightmare? Her worst nightmare is the bastard crown prince in the rival country next door, who doesn't really want to be royal, who doesn't know how to be royal, who's totally American and doesn't have any time for any of this business. And early on in my drafting, it was a great moment when I realized that her royal jewels would be a burden to her. They would be something that she has the heaviest tiara because her other sisters don't want to bear that weight, and it's both literal and metaphorical. she's bearing all of the weight of it. And there's this great moment when he just takes her bobby pins out and helps her lift that tiara off her head. And it was one of those scenes that really sustains you as you're writing, because at this point, they're not in a romantic relationship. It's a little bit of a drought. We're not going to get kissing for a little bit. And I'm like, but we are going to get some touching and we are going to build some intimacy and we are going to sort of advance the idea that these people really belong together. And I loved writing that scene.
I guess it shows like just a small helping and to bear burdens as well. Like he's offering that to share her burden as well, which is like the perfect sort of moment to write as
Yes.
well.
Yes. I love that.
So with your characters, I know it's in a family, like it's family based. Did you or did they get established in with being established in the first book? Did you always know you would go through the family, and did you sort of have an idea of what they would look like and everything as well from the very first?
So it's interesting because both of my series are sort of standalone series. So each book is sort of meant to build off the one before, but not be so integrated that I can't have a lot of fun. So I try really hard not to make anything too concrete in those first ones. I give, I think that when I started my second book, all I knew about the the sister who it was about was her name, her age, where she'd gone to like university, and that she liked roast beef sandwiches quite a bit. And I was like, okay, so she's hungry. That's what else? Oh, and that she didn't like touching much, which I was like,
Lovely.
oh, oh my goodness. Which is great as a side character. I'm like, as a side character, this is wonderful,
Yeah.
'cause it's so interesting. And then as a main character, I'm like, so she doesn't like touching? Like for real, she doesn't like touching. So I do sometimes get myself into pickles. But any of the stuff that I leave sort of scattered in the first book, I go back and I go, how is that a strength? Or how is that a weakness? Or neither of those, how is that an obstacle to my character having a total arc? And for instance, in that second book, it was that she was completely self-sufficient and um, then find somebody else to kind of wrap into her self-sufficiency. And they become this really tightly integrated team. As I move forward with the series, that's going to cause problems for some of the other sisters who are a little upset by feeling excluded, or, it's going to have consequences. And these aren't ones that I necessarily plan, but it's like, oh, I can work with this. I can make a romance in this, no problem. So that's just sort of I arrive with each book like, what bombs have gone off?
What will I need to try and work out to make it
Yes,
work through this story?
yes.
Which of your characters do you relate to the most and why?
Oh, goodness me. Um, let's see. So for my princess series, I really love Ella, whose book we haven't got yet. She's a sister who's super into K-dramas. She's she's a little like loud. She's a little, I'm not super loud. In some ways, I'm quite introverted, but she sort of like gets to be loud on my behalf. But she has an intense familial loyalty. And I really resonate with that. I love how loyal she is and how she is ride or die for her sisters. She's going to end up sacrificing quite a lot for them. And I feel the same way about my own family. I want to be there for them and I want to, uplift them when they're having a great time, and I want to sort of support them when they're having a bad time. So that sense of family that Ella has is something I really resonate to.
I think we all resonate with the sense of family because we, no matter what our families look like, we always have their backs, and want to support them as well. How has writing and publishing books changed the way you see yourself?
Oh, goodness. I've been a stay-at-home mom for 24 years. Um, I was lucky enough to once my husband and I were graduated and we had our first jobs and then we had children and we have 5 children. And so it's kept me busy over the years. And I've never been somebody who felt like that meant I had to be boring or that meant I had to be constrained. Um, I really, which is not to say, again, I raised a child we nicknamed the demon BB of Bethany. He really was that bad. Um, it was not all roses, but I had this sense that I could live my life. And my husband is always been supportive, always been like, oh, what a lovely enthusiasm you have dragged home. He's just been very, very that way always. But it's been very cool as I've become an author. Um, I will tell you that my love for my family has really grown, in part because with some of my books, I'm working out things. I have a book that I really did dedicate to that very difficult infant, and it was interesting how I got to kind of work out how I feel about raising a child who's not neurotypical, or how I should maybe as a mom step back, or things like that. I'm often having a conversation with myself through the books, and hopefully they're entertaining for everybody else too. um, but that was really neat, seeing how sweetly supportive all of my kids are. I have 3 sons and 2 daughters, and um, they're just really supportive. They know that when, I'm getting down to the wire, they need to help out a little more with the housekeeping and the dishes doing, and they're very sweetly proud of me, which is just
Really
it's a
good.
lovely benefit. And then my husband is very supportive. I dedicated The Midnight Princess to him. And I talk about how these books just could not exist if he didn't love me as well as he does. I don't want to get like choked up about it, but let me testify. Like, he is really, really supportive, and that's been tested through the process of having to create books and having me be less available and busier, and it's just been neat that he's just been like, let me pick up the slack for you, babe. I love it.
That's perfect. That's definitely what you love to see and hear about the supportive of partners and families when you do know it is a big, big thing to be writing books as well.
Yeah.
Are there any books or authors that inspired you to become a writer?
So I mentioned Betty Niels and Essie Summers. Again, those are classic Mills and Boone authors. I think that Essie Summers might still be the highest producing New Zealand author. And she never I never see her get talked about, but I definitely want to shout her from the skies. She had a huge impact on how I write. And there are certainly more contemporary ones, but if I can talk about Essie Summers for a second, one of the things that really impacted me about her stories, and as with all sort of mid-century harlequins, they're gonna be short, they're gonna be a little travelogue-y, a little formulaic. That's all true. But she wrote very boldly about a couple in the end wouldn't necessarily end up happy in the sense that they would get money and fame and suddenly their lives would be easy. Like, very often at the end of her books, it would be like, well, it's you and me on a remote sheep farm with these 3 orphan children I guess we're raising. And I think reading her books, I think she had 30 something books, always gave me a sense that happily ever afters do not come prepackaged.
Yeah.
They don't come looking all perfect and full of ease. Though those books have their place. Like those books where you're like, oh, and she never had to lift her finger ever again in her life. Like, take me to that fantasy. I love
Yeah.
it. But S.U. Summers really championed her home country. I really have a strong sense of where she's from. And I want to also give that to my readers, even if it's not where I'm physically from, it's who I am. That goes in my books. It also has family relationships that require something of you. I like books about found family. I really do. But I will tell you, I resonate more with books where people have to come to grips with the family they were born into. And that's, again, both kinds of books absolutely have their place, and need their place in the sun. But for me, the ones that resonate are like, how can I make peace and bring oneness and wholeness to this family that I have, these people that I'm kind of stuck with, and how do I work out relationships that are messy and hard and and sometimes very difficult. So that's another way she really impacted me. But again, like, I love just how hardworking everybody and in the end is. I don't want to work that hard. I'm incredibly like, my nature is to be incredibly lazy. I don't live a life where I get to be that, but like luxuriating on a beach, that's totally me. But I just get something out of like, show me this world in which people, the power goes out and you're delivering sheep in the kitchen and you
Yeah.
have to make bread from scratch because you don't have a store next door. I'm certainly impacted by the wonderful authors that I meet on Instagram. That's been neat too, sort of in a collegial way. Um, People are so much more helpful than you think they're going to be.
Mm,
And that's been the really neat thing about sort of being a more public author, because for the first few years, you're like just doing it in your own little bat cave.
yeah.
Um, so that's been incredible.
It's really cool to hear about the author, like how supportive all the authors are on social
Yeah.
media and everything. Like there's no competitiveness or anything. Like
I've
you're all
never had a bad
really,
experience, not even once. And I've been doing this for 10 years. People are incredibly generous with their time and their efforts.
it's amazing to hear. That everyone just wants each other's stories to be out there and shared, which is lovely. What advice would you give to a writer working on their first book? And if you were given any advice?
Um, when I was working on my first book, I started before I should have. Like I just was like one day, I think I was watching a YouTube video. I don't know how familiar you are with the author Brandon Sanderson.
Mhm.
He has these incredibly generous author development courses on YouTube. And I was like, I had a 2-year-old, my youngest at the time, crawling all over me. And I was like, I think it would be a great time to write a book with this baby all over me. And so I did it with all the bravery and stupidity of somebody who didn't know better. And the thing that really helped was that I gave myself a lot of grace for not starting earlier. I started in my late 30s. Um, I see other women and they are starting younger, and I'm like, oh man, they are amazing. And they're juggling a lot of the same things I was doing. And how did they do it? And it's okay. It's okay to start when you start, like giving yourself grace is big. Another thing is I happened to be part of an incredible critique group. We found each other, like they were people that I knew, and I just discussed. One wrote magazine articles, and then a little poking found out that she was working on a novel. Another admitted to taking screenwriting classes, and a little poking found out she also was writing a novel. We were all equally ignorant. We had to bring our babies, two of us had babies the same age, to critique groups, and we would get our critiques, sometimes with our babies screaming in our face. You'd be like, oh, it took me all week to produce these 10 wretched pages that you're literally ripping apart. And then I have a baby screaming in my face. This is great. But we were really supportive and there for each other. And at one point with my first book, I was the only romance author of them. The other two were middle grade authors. At one point with my first book, one of them banged the table really hard. And she said, I'll do it right now. She said, "This is a romance. Where's the romance?" And I realized that I'd been so scared to write a bad kiss. I
Mm,
was so scared. I was so scared to like come and present this idea of, well, this is good for me. Is it
yeah.
super cringe and awful for you? Like it was so scary. And I think my advice is do it scared. Do it scared. Um, don't hate yourself if you have a bunch of false starts. I wrote first a lot of first chapters in a lot of years, just like, oh, I'm seized by a sudden enthusiasm and life got in the way, and that's okay. When you're ready, you'll be ready, and do it, and it's gonna be terrible. Gonna be terrible, and then your work is much harder thereafter to get it less terrible. And you'll make bad choices. That's okay. It's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. Once it's out there, then you can get to work on something. And I think it's incredibly brave to tell any story because you are sort of planting your flag about the values you hold, the worldview you espouse, the person you are, the things that the soft creature of your flesh loves. You're being so vulnerable and opening yourself up so much, and there's nothing more brave, I think.
That's perfect advice, honestly, and very inspiring. What was your favorite? Do you have a favorite writing snack or drink?
Oh my goodness. I keep saying, oh my goodness, when you ask me stuff, sorry.
That's all right.
I went during COVID when we were like full of lockdowns and everything. I had what was called panic Twizzlers. They're regular Twizzlers. They were strawberry flavored Twizzlers, and most people hate Twizzlers, but for whatever reason, Twizzlers. I am a water girl, which is hilarious because I don't drink anything but ice water, really. I mean, some cocoa and some cider, but that's it. I don't even drink tea. And there I was for a long time writing Regency romance, and people are like, "Would you like some tea?" Me furiously Googling what on earth they would be drinking. My characters are drinking alcohol, and I'm like, listen to me looking like I know what I'm talking about. I do have a friend who's like who lends me her husband, and I'm like, so the hops are really good in this kind of beer. And he's like, yes, they are. And I use that. I use it all. But no, it's usually just a big thing of ice water, gum. I choose gum. Again, during COVID, when things were really bad, my husband worked from home. This is I would crawl, I would army crawl sometimes behind if he had a meeting, and before he knew backdrops and whatever, to get to the drawer with the M&Ms, the peanut M&Ms. Be like, this is really important. I just need a handful, and I'm out of here.
Perfect snacks, in all honesty, can't go wrong with them.
That's right. I'd love to be like, oh, kombucha and like kale chips. No, it's all sugar.
Sugar. Well, water is good for you too.
It is very good. We've got good water here in Oregon, so
Do you play music while you write? And if you do, what's your favorite music?
I didn't used to at all. And then something switched for me. I tend to really enjoy sort of like jazz cafe, piano music, rainstorm. That stuff's really good for me to kind of just get into it. Though every once in a while, when I know that I'm writing a certain trope, like enemies to lovers or friends to lovers or whatever, I'll go and find a song that's really that. And I'll just sort of like hype myself up and I'll be like, okay, we are going to kiss today. You've
Get
got
in the
to be in
mood.
the zone.
Need to set the tone for the scene.
You really do. So that's what I'll do.
And my final question is, who has been your biggest supporter of your writing outside your family?
Oh, so I have a friend named Afton. She was part of that critique group, the original three that met, and she she wasn't a romance author, but she was a romance reader. And she's been tremendously helpful because her writing chops are like her taste is excellent. I trusted her taste beyond anything, and I trusted her ability to critique. Often when you're an author, you will have a manuscript and you'll be like, okay, it's time to give this to somebody. And you'll give it to somebody and they'll come back. And with all the love in their heart, they'll say, I loved that. That was no notes. And that is great. But I didn't need that. I needed somebody to say, this isn't working. Your continuity's off. The pacing is all out here. You say your characters did this here, but then there's no consequence for it later. Um, she really held me to account, and she was probably the first person I ever admitted. It's scary to admit you're writing because, like, who do you think you are to be writing? You know,
The
like
imposter
for the
syndrome.
yes, the imposter syndrome, and sort of like, you feel like a vampire, like you want to like raise your cloak and hiss your fangs or something. How dare you ask? But she was somebody who just took that information so gently, and she could have been like, oh well, I write magazine articles, you're not where I am. And instead she was like, a writing group, let's do it. And she was not the one with the two little babies playing at their feet. She put up with so much from us, and she was just sort of like, yep, okay, we're here and we're gonna do it. And I'll love her forever for that, because she's even still, if I need to talk with her through some thorny, issue and say, "You think this makes sense?" She'll say yes or no, and she'll give me a lot of her time and feedback. And anyway, I love her.
You need the friend, and you need a person who will like be honest, but like out of the
So
kindness of their
gently.
heart, and
Yes,
not completely rip you to shreds.
that's it. That's exactly it.